presumably qualified to, I say he's presumably qualified to do it.
Once again, we're taping in the State Library series for the archives in Frankfurt, and a copy to go to the Pogue Library of Oral History at Murray State University, and a copy paid for by WCBL and Shelby McCallum owner to the Marshall County Library System, with branches in Benton, Calvert City, and Hardin. Now, we're starting out with Mr. McCallum. We're utilizing, incidentally, the lovely living room here of Corinne Whitehead, and we're also glad to have as a guest Mrs. Whitaker of the Benton Tribune Courier, who's been very cooperative in providing publicity for the series, originally suggested by Shelby McCallum. Shelby, I happen to know that you're not a native of Marshall County, but you've been here so long that there isn't much.
People are getting tired of me, I guess.
I doubt that. I think you proved over the years that you were quite popular, and they're a man in Frankfurt, they like to say. Where were you born?
I was born in Jackson, Tennessee. My home was Humboldt, but back in, when I was born in 1917, Humboldt did not have any gynecologist. I guess that's what you'd call a baby doctor, wouldn't you?
Well, that's one way of referring to him.
So they took me over to Jackson, and I was born in Jackson, Tennessee.
Well, isn't that terrible? See, I was born on the farm at Hardin RFD1. Back when I was born, we didn't have big city people like you around, you see.
Well, I don't mean to get into a lot of medical terminology here, but I was what they called a blue baby. And they told me, have told me, had I not gone to Jackson to a hospital, I might not be here today.
Well, you were born how long ago, Shelby? You're
1917.
So you're 65 years of age. Could you tell us, for the benefit of the genealogist, something of your father's name and your mother's name?
Yes, my mother was a Scales. My grandmother was a Piercy. My father was a McCallum. Almost all of my father's people were of Scotch descent, and most of my mothers were of English. I haven't been able to find any Irish. I would like to, because I understand Scotch-Irish is the very best, but that's the story.
Scotch-Irish actually are not really Scotch or Irish either, maybe. They came from Northern Ireland. They were the Protestant Irish, and sometimes they had a little Scotch, I suppose, about them. Well, you grew up then in the Jackson, Tennessee area? First I heard of you, you were around Humboldt.
That is my home. Humboldt was my home. All of both my parents' people and their predecessors came from South and North Carolina. And I might say that some of them came over in the 1600s.
All right, you finished high school in, about 38 or 39 in Humboldt, and about then did you come to Benton?
36, and I worked a year in Greenfield, Tennessee.
For whom did you work?
The Ruffin Amusement Company was a subsidiary of the Crescent Amusement Company of Nashville, Tennessee, which operated 220 theaters. They were told that the Kentucky Dam was going to make this the garden spot of the world, and they bought the theater in Benton and sent me up here to run it. And I had only been in the manager of the theater 9 months in Greenfield, Tennessee.
So here you were, the #1 representative of Crescent Amusement in Marshall County, and they were just starting the dam, however, and a number of things were beginning to pop. It was actually a good time to come to Benton, was it not?
It was indeed, and if I might, I know I don't do like you want me to do, but we are not interviewing Ernie Bush. You've already interviewed him, but Ernie Bush Whitehead had a store next door to the theater, and when the owner or the president of the company came, he spent 5 times more time in looking over Ernie Bush's store than he did the theater he just purchased.
Yes, I recall the incident of that tape, but one of our more interesting ones, incidentally. Well, you got busy, and the old Benton Theater needed remodeling. Did you set about on that project pretty rapidly?
I had nothing to do with it. When they bought the theater, they intended to build a new one, and they gave me the job of finding a lot, finding a place to build it. I think it's right interesting. I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school. I know some of his daughters. I was sent down to Mr. Edgar Ferguson to buy the building over there. Nationally, it's now known as the National Stores. Mm-hmm. They were going to tear it down, remodel it, and build quite a theater. He gave me a bawling out, and he said, "How old are you?" I told him 22. He said, "If your boss wants to talk business, tell him to come down to see me, that I'm not doing business with kids." Well, I called back to Nashville, and they said they had no intention of coming down here. Find another place.
So he lost his sight. Right, anyway, you did get into the theater business, and everything improved. Could you tell us any of the incidents that gave you an early impression of Marshall County? What about the story on you had a Ford and you needed tires for it, and you wanted to borrow, was it $50? And you went to the...
Oh, no. I went up to the Bank of Marshall County, Ray, and I don't guess at Humboldt I could have borrowed $25, but I had a Ford that needed new tires. My good friend Loma Trevathan's daughter worked there, and I needed a set of new tires. And I said, "Could I borrow $75? I'm the new manager of the theater." Well, she says, "Let's just make it 100. I think interest then was about 2 or 3%. I said, "Well, why not? Why not?" So I found Benton a very, very hospitable and friendly community from the very beginning.
All right. I'd like for you to make a few comments on some of the people that you became acquainted with and later were important in your life. For example, since we're on Lohman, mention him. Perhaps any humorous other things that you might want to say about it.
Well, Loma Trevathan, BL as we called him, he never turned me down on anything. We had a doctor here, Dr. Green. I guess he felt like that they paid us so poorly. He was my doctor. He never sent me a bill. He took care of all my medical needs free. Dr. Mert Wolf was a dentist here. He's still living, and I hope he hears this program. He went for years and never sent me a bill for taking care of my teeth. Actually didn't have much business then.
Hope he's retired now. Everybody else may want free dental service.
He has retired, and I don't believe that they will get free dental service. But Dr. Faust, I moved into his home soon after I came here. I lived in a couple of places earlier than that, but I won't go into that. And he and his wife was almost a second mother to me. I paid $10 a month rent, and seldom did I miss a meal there. At noon and all, they'd say, "Dinner's ready." And I doubt if you could find that sort of accommodation here. I doubt if Corinne Whitehead would even accommodate you to that extent.
Good. Well, somewhere in your career, you became fast friends with a dentist by the name of what, R.E. Faust, Dr. Faust?
That's who I'm talking about, yeah. That's where I live.
So you lived there.
Yeah.
And did Lohman introduce you to him, or how'd you get to know him?
Oh, it wasn't difficult in Benton in those days. The total population when I came here was 1,675 people. Running a theater, you pretty well met everybody, and he was a member of the Board of Education, and it didn't take me long to meet people like that. And of course, I dated his daughter, and I suspect that the marriage might have occurred if I hadn't gone to war later on.
Well, I guess it was Pont Nelson that told me a story about Dr. Faust. Said a traveling man was eating a bite at the soda fountain, and they heard a noise outside. The man ran out, and he saw that his car had been hit, and the left rear fender had been knocked off. And so he just saw the car going around the corner. And so he was worried, of course, and he thought he'd lost everything. And Pont says, "Don't worry about it." Says, "What kind of car was it? Did you get enough glimpse to tell?" He said, "Yes, it was a Hupmobile." He said, "Okay, don't worry, it was Dr. Faust." And says he'll pay for it.
Well, that's a very true story, and I say that the culture and the people of Marshall County, I don't mean to offend anybody, but I think we have culturally and intellectually progressed considerably. I remember over at Birmingham, Birmingham, Kentucky, rather. Let me correct that. Our salesman crossed the river, and a gentleman there, I won't call his name, he ran a garage repair shop and a restaurant with connecting doors. And this salesman crossed the river on the ferry over there at Birmingham, and he walked in, the proprietor did, and he wiped the grease off his hands. And he says, "What do you have?" The salesman says, "I'll have a hard-boiled egg and a Pepsi-Cola."
He didn't believe it was up to the health department standards then, quite. No. And apparently it wasn't. Well, you mentioned going off to war. Now, that were you drafted into what branch of the service?
Well, you better believe I was drafted. I had the most unprofitable operation I ever had. It had been profitable at Chickasaw. It had been profitable at Cherokee. I thought I'd landed a bonanza. I got a contract to operate the motion picture theater at Kentucky Dam Village. And I turned out to run a babysitting institute because Paducah was too close. And, of course, it was wet. Now, I know you're dry, but there are those who like a little libation now and then. And I tried to get off from under that contract everywhere in the world, and a good friend of mine, R.M. Hoisington, was reservoir property manager, and Dr. Jessup was head of the building of the dam, and they had equal authority. R.M. Hoisington's job was to clear out all of the timber and land that had to be cleared for the lake and to run the village and the restaurants and the theaters and so on. He would not let me out of that contract. Well, I got a letter from a dear friend of mine named President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and it said, "Greetings." I took that over there and showed that to Mr. Hoisington, and he says, you're released.
Automatically and unequivocally. He couldn't very well stop that. Well, tell us some of the things that, Shelby, you've always, it seemed to me, been able to jump out of the Empire State Building and land on your feet running. Now, you went into the service, and you were, a private when you were first drafted. Where did you train?
I went first to Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana, and then I was transferred to Pensacola, Florida, and we were the Army contingent that protected the artillery unit that they don't have them anymore, that protected Pensacola Harbor. And I took my training there. We had the 164th Infantry Division there, And originally I was in the military police.
You used to call them Coast Artillery, didn't they?
That's right, Coast Artillery. You're right. And I saw a chance. It's been my luck to always miscalculate. I saw a chance to stay in the United States. You understand, I didn't get that greetings letter through volunteering, although I do consider myself reasonably patriotic. The military police battalion I was in was designed to go to Germany and be an army of occupation. Mm-hmm. So I jumped at a chance to transfer to Fort Crowder, Missouri, and I transferred to the motion picture section, which I was familiar with, and I was accepted. But when I got there, they had filled it up. They had nothing for me to do, and I had to do 8 basic training courses with new recruits, which was terrible. And I ended up in the artillery right over with General Patton, and I didn't. That was another goof I made. I didn't succeed. And I might add this: that if I had kept my mouth shut, which I always talk too much, the military police division that was being trained to go overseas ended up in Centennial Park in Nashville, Tennessee, riding the railroad trains from New Orleans to New York.
And they really had a hard war ahead of them.
Yeah, they did.
Well, Shelby, how did you manage to wind up as an aide to a general or of some sort? Didn't you, were you in charge of orders, or didn't you make it after you got to Europe into some rather unusual situations for?
Not really an aide to a general. You pushed me too far there. I was an aide to a major in Pensacola, Florida, and they made me secretary of the CDD board. That is the board that dismisses soldiers who have psychoneurosis, and they have about 3 or 4 doctors, and then they have a corporal. I was a corporal by then, by the way, like Hitler. Hitler and Napoleon made that. They made that. And anyway, I kept the records for them. Well, that's the highest I got. And of course, I was amused by how disgusted they were with some American soldiers who wanted out of the Army at any cost.
But it seems to me that I've heard some stories, Shelby, that you were able to assign yourself to go visit, let's say, Paris, France, and maybe, if not Berlin, some of the German cities.
Oh, I was in Berlin.
Is that true?
Yeah. Well, I got a job in headquarters, and I found out through my knowledge that I'd learned here in Marshall County, it was very easy to change a 3 to an 8. And so if my furlough was from the 5th to was from the 1st to the 3rd, all I had to do was make it the 8th, and I had a little bit more time on my hands. Yeah. And I don't know, that a little crooked, but the war was over then, Ray, and I thought that was legitimate.
You made some friends among German, even a German physician. I recall not too long ago you're getting a letter and asking me to translate it, and it told about the death of this man. And at that time, you reported some things about his saving an American soldier's life, which was illegal, and some other events that you had with his family.
Yes, he was a graduate of the Heidelberg Medical School. He was a surgeon. I met his wife and his sister, who was not married, and I dated his sister, who was not married, his wife's sister, who was not married. And I got to be very close friends of theirs, and he finally came home. He was on the Italian front. I went back over there, I don't know, 4 or 5 times and visited them in their homes. I don't know of any doctors that haven't made it, even in Germany, you know. He had a beautiful home, 3-story affair with a marble stairway and all that. I visited them several times. But back to what you were talking about, it was an English soldier driving through this town. Now, right after the war, the Americans, or the general staff, or whoever, issued orders that no German doctor could treat any Allied soldier under any circumstances. Well, this English soldier had an attack of appendicitis. They brought him in. He told me his blood count was very high, and he yanked his appendix out.
His life.
And he said it was a very simple operation for him, and he wondered. Well, he was scared to death. I said, well, I wouldn't report it. I wouldn't do anything. And believe it or not, nothing ever happened.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And then you were, as you said, able, after the war was over, to go back and visit in their homes a number of times.
What did they call it? The non-visitation rule applied only for a few months.
Mm-hmm. The non-fraternizing.
That's right, non-fraternization.
Yeah,
but nobody paid any attention to it, so they might as well have, abolished it.
Well, am I remembering something that didn't occur? But it seems to me that on some occasion you were able to get some blanks, some papers, and order yourself to go see a part of the world that normally wouldn't have been within your purview.
I think you're getting a little off base. We got a pass to England. I did do this. These Germans had friends in England. I went to England and I took letters from them, which was in violation of all the law, all the rules. And the British friends of theirs had visited them for many years in Germany, and they'd met in Switzerland way back yonder. I took a lot of gifts back from the British. I took coffee and things that were scarce in Germany. The plane made a crash landing at Orly in Paris, and one of the wings scraped the runway. I had a fellow named Joe Marabito. I've tried to find him. I've never been able to locate him. He had studied for the priesthood, but he had defected, and he swore he was going to pay back the Catholic Church for his very excellent education. But at any rate, he says, how in the world are we going to stay in Paris without any money? I said, well, we'll go to the commissary and get some cigarettes. So we got 4 cartons of cigarettes, and he says, well, how are we going to sell them? Well, I said, that's simple. Just walk down the main street of Paris. Just walk down the Champs-Élysées, and somebody will contact you. Well, we hadn't gone as far as from here to the door until somebody wanted to know if we wanted to sell those cigarettes, and they brought a fortune. So I took him down. Paris has underground restrooms, if I might use that word. And so we took him down there, and we got a very good price for those cigarettes. I think something like $50 a carton. And so we came back up, and the military police stopped us. And they said, did you sell that fellow those cigarettes? I said, why, he's a friend of mine that I met during the liberation of Paris. So they dismissed us. And so we had 3 or 4 days in Paris. I might say this, as Dr. Miller told you earlier, it's the only time in my life I ever got the seventh day itch. We had to have somewhere to sleep, so we went to what they call a repel-depel depot. That's where soldiers with no place to sleep could go. And scabies is what they called it then. So they sprayed me with DDT, which they would not do today.
That's old-fashioned 7-year itch.
Yeah. And I was about to drive me crazy. I got back to Germany on a train, and I went to this German doctor, Dr. Giesiking. He says, well, I'm not allowed to treat American soldiers, you know that, but says, I can cure that overnight. He had sulfur drugs.
He said, go ahead.
And I said, give me a bottle of it. So, sure enough, I got rid of my scabies overnight.
Great. I'll tell you, you people who are listening to this tape from now till Gabriel blows his horn will see that Shelby always landed on his feet.
No,
I don't believe I would have ever thought of saying he's an old friend I met during
Let me tell you one more
Liberation
thing.
Paris.
You know, you have to have a pass to stay in Paris for 3 days.
Yeah.
And you have to type it out. Well, I worked out in headquarters in Germany. I knew how the terminology, and I knew they were typed on typewriters.
Yeah.
The Army didn't have, what do you call it? They didn't have what they've got today. The
Word processors. And
all that, no. So I walked in a Paris bank, and Marabita says, you crazy. I walked in the Paris bank, and a big bank. I said, I want to borrow your typewriter. Well, this Frenchman said, all right. And I typed out 2 passes, one for me, one for Marabita. I signed Lieutenant so-and-so for mine, and he signed Lieutenant so-and-so for his. We got checked 2 or 3 times, and it went right through.
Again, my point, Miss Corinne, that he always landed on his feet. Yeah. He learned well in Marshall County or Humboldt or somewhere. Well, you had gone away to war, and I know you won't want to call any names on this tape, and perhaps you won't even want to tell the story.
Sure.
But I would like to hear about how you left your car and then came back, and somebody you'd made a deal with let's say the Ford dealer to get a car when you returned, and someone else maybe sued in there, and then
Well,
but
I don't think this is great relevance, but the point is, I was told by one of the car dealers that they would give me, $600 for my car. I had a 41 Chevrolet. And they'd sell me a new car when I got back. I went to another car dealer, and I don't mind telling you, the second car dealer was Jim Kenny. Well, he says, I'll give you $400 for it, but I'll guarantee you I'll sell you a brand new car when you get back from the Army. Well, that's what I wanted, of course. Everybody at my age wanted a car, 22, 20 years old, 21, 22. I said, okay, take it. And his son-in-law had a job at Paducah, and he needed it, and so I let him have it. I got back. They had a list on their wonder of any number of names, and one of my neighbor's names was next on the list. And I walked in, and both faces fell. Jim Kenny and his son-in-law off his height. And Jim Kenny said, well, we promised Shelby we'd sell him the car as soon as he got back. Said, we're going to do it. They got sued. And they went to court. And my neighbor sued them. And the attorney who represented my neighbor apparently told him to deny everything. So apparently he did. And they had Judge Price, and the document that they had to base their case on was a signature he had with the contract with the motor company. He denied it was his signature, so the judge threw the case out. The trial lasted about 5 minutes. So I got the car. I got the car at list price. And I'll always be grateful to people honoring oral agreements.
Yeah. Shelby, our time is just about gone. There are 10 million other things I'd like to ask you, and I know Corinne Whitehead is going to ask you about your political career.
I doubt that, but
And,
I wouldn't be surprised.
So we'll pick up right there. I would like to thank you for all the many things you've done for me, and just say this much about your political career. When I was working as executive assistant in Dr. Wood's office, you may recall that
You were running the university.
well, he sent me to Frankfurt to see if we could get House Bill 238 written, you recall. And we went up one day. I went with you and made it a university, and there was a 24-inch snowfall.
And there have been some doubts about it since then, but
nobody came to work that day. The legislature didn't meet. The governor walked in hip boots. That was Governor Breathitt. And you recall that he said, well, I'll let you and Bill Reynolds get over here and work out the bill. So I tried to put everything in it that you could have a doctor's degree and so on. Well, of course, the governor wouldn't buy that. Eventually, we got finished, and
I got a Kentucky colonel.
Yeah.
I've gotten about 4 of them there.
The odd part was that when we went home, I would like you to tell about this lady's influence. Eventually, we got finished, and
I got a Kentucky colonel.
Yeah.
I've gotten about 4 of them there.
The odd part was that when we went home, I would like you to tell about this lady's influence. We got home, and the power had been cut off. Do you recall that particular instance, Shelby?
You mean when we had the tornadoes?
No. I suppose that would have been a more sensible tale to tell about the tornadoes. But this was, I was staying with you at a house you'd rented.
Oh, you're talking about, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about now. You're talking about Mrs.
Lenny.
Not Lenny. You're talking about Lenny McLaughlin down Louisville. You're thinking, I'm talking about Lizzie Lyon.
Yeah.
We got up, Ray and I did, after my first wife passed away from congestive heart failure. They insisted I come back to Frankfurt. Well, she had always paid all the bills, everything, and so I got in there. We had no heat, we had no water, we had no lights, but nothing. And so it was Sunday night at 11 o'clock. I called Mrs. Lyon, and I said, what in the world can I do? Well, she said, just leave it to me. And I'd called the power company, and they said they did not do work that time of the night, that it was impossible. Well, when I called Mrs. Lyon, within 30 minutes, they were out there with ladders and poles, and they had our lights and water and everything on, and so she is a Marshall County, I believe, or Lyon County, and I would say she had considerable influence. And so she had me back in the business right quick. And said she just called him up and said, there's no question about it, go do it. Now, what was the other thing you were about to leave out about... I was going to mention, and if Ray will give me the time, Corinne says this one won't be a 30-minute one anyway, so we had 4 tornadoes come through Marshall County, and it showed me what bureaucracy can do. And the man, I can't think of his name for the life of me, but he was in charge of the hospitalization section of the health department. And Dr. Miller, he remembered it.
Yes.
He said, we've got numerous people with broken limbs and this and that. This hospital was sitting here, but it had not been inspected and approved by the Department of Health section that had to approve it. Mm-hmm. Oh, he told them there's no way they could open it until they got down here and approved it. And so Dr. Miller called me, and I was Speaker of the House, I happened to be at the time, and so they called me out of the chair, and I was very much disturbed because my wife and children were both here, and I ran down to the governor's office and got down there as quickly as I could. And the governor said, well, I am absolutely amazed that they'd even bother to ask. And he got on the phone and he got the hospital open within 5 minutes. But Dr. Miller said in a way it was, they did not have electricity, wasn't that correct?
Yes, that's true. And they started up the mobile generator that they'd bought, but they'd bought a mobile generator so small that it wouldn't run the X-ray machine.
But it was a big help.
Yeah, it did help. Well, thank you very much, Shelby McCallum. We've had a wonderful time, and I appreciate all the stories you've told. And I believe that will give us the ideas that the State Board is looking for the archives in Frankfurt, for the Pogue Oral History Library at Murray State,
Well, I can tell you, Ray,
and for Marshall County.
You've asked a lot of other people, which I've eliminated, that there were very few paved streets when I came here and all that. I won't go and reiterate all that, because if they are interested, they'll find that out from
On somebody else's tape. Well, that's what I thought, Shelby. Not everyone in our county has been Speaker of the House, and so I wanted to utilize his strongest points. I'm Ray Mofield, and this concludes our broadcast for today.